Hola, muy buenos días a todos de la Asociación ITK de Alemania en México. El día de hoy vamos a tener una plática muy especial con el profesor Duarte Araujo. Él es profesor de la Universidad de Lisboa y va a platicarnos de un tema muy interesante que es sobre lo que se refiere a los sistemas dinámicos, a las habilidades en estas ecologías que hoy se están trabajando muchísimo, estos temas que están muy en boga y hay que profundizar un poco sobre estos conceptos, ya que son la actualidad en el mundo del deporte, en el mundo de la ciencia, y es por eso que hemos tenido la oportunidad y ha aceptado con mucho gusto el profesor para poder participar con nosotros. El día de hoy la entrevista la vamos a realizar en inglés y bueno, eso también para fines de que pueda ser más fluida la entrevista y que también se pueda transmitir a nivel internacional. The professor Duarte Araujo is Associated Professor of Sport and Health, Head of Laboratory of Expertise in Sport, Director of Research Center CIPER, Vice President of Scientific Council, Member of Scientific Council of National Plan for the Promotion of Physical Activity. Thank you for accepting our invitation, Professor. It's a great authority and prominent researcher in fields like affordance and making decision, development of expertise, performance analysis, ecological dynamics, and complex systems. Thank you, teacher, for stay here.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for your kind introduction.
Well, Professor, in areas like sports science and training, the ecological dynamics are emerging topics, but which are the basis for ecological dynamics?
Yeah. Well, this is a very interesting question, and it also has many implications. I will try to answer it the best as I can. The idea of ecological dynamics is maybe a little bit more recent, as you said, but I think sports practice in itself, it's both dynamic and practice in the ecology of sport. So what I would like to say by saying this is that in general we can match very well what attentive coaches are doing, and we are somehow improving their work and also showing that their work is really on the right direction. So it's not something that just came from the theory to the field, but it came a lot from the field. So this is the main idea, but I would like to detail a little bit more about this. The tendencies in training and sports sciences started, well, the scientific influences started to be more biologically driven, you know, from the works of Matveyev, who worked in swimming, and all those biological variables that should control and give the principles for training. However, other scientists like Leon Teodorescu, for example, show that in sports like football, the training cannot be simply based on the biological principles. There are more variables telling a lot about what can happen during the training session and what are the responses from the player to those training sessions. So this confluence of factors showed and led that several coaches to develop their own processes, which are not strictly based on what we see in the principles of training, which are very much or more near to the biological principles than to behavioral principles, for example. And ecological dynamics, what wanted to do was a little bit to show that all these aspects from biology, from psychology, from sociology can come together in an approach that helps the coach and the teachers to understand how learning happens, how this is the process of learning over time. So the idea is that it's not simply things that happen inside of the individual, like biological or psychological aspects. It's not simply the facilities that you have with very lots of money to buy many balls or many fields. It's not simply the environment or the individual, but how the individual acts in certain environments. That's why we also showed in some studies that some environments that are not really helpful for developing players, like for example the Pelada in Brazil, this lack of resources helped many players to become world level. So it means that it's not a question of the environment strictly, it's not a question of the player intrinsically, it's how both things go together. And based on the motor learning principles and ecological motor learning principles, because there are other principles that are more organismic based or cognitive based, we developed several proposals and also research to show that this may help in guiding this process of training sports. And so ecological dynamics is based on how dynamical systems evolve over time, and teams are dynamical systems, players are dynamical systems, saying that this should be done mainly in their ecologies, so in the places where they compete, where they play. So other environments are not the best place to develop the skills of the player. The best places to develop the skills of the player are those related with the match, not other places. And third, that this process is complex. It's based on multi-level variables, biological, psychological, sociological, and all those should come together. That it should not be seen as separate processes. So this is the general view of ecological dynamics and training.
So, well, and the ecological dynamics is not only one approach, or is only not only one theory. You can say that it is the construction is with different areas in where they try to understand how the human being learn the movement.
Exactly. So we call it's more a framework, not a theory, but a framework. And inside this framework, inside this approach, there are many theories for specific aspects. But generally, is a framework, is a way of understanding learning, as you said.
Could you say that these ecological dynamics skills is the revolution in motor learning?
Well, how can I put this? I think the true revolutionaries were the coaches. We learn a lot from coaches. It was based on coaches. For example, I'm Portuguese from Lisbon. I had the pleasure to see coaches like Carlos Queiroz, like José Mourinho, and the way they act is so informative for theory. If I try strictly to apply the theories that I knew before I see their work into the field, I think those approaches, those typical cognitive information processing approaches, would be very restrictive. They do much more than that, than just simply to make the players process certain informations and have certain outputs. It's much more rich than that. They really try to create environments where the players want to excel themselves, where they combine with each other much beyond their own characteristics. They create links that show combinations that they never did before. So all this has to do with dynamics and with ecology. So I think they were revolutionary in how they did it. What we did was more to show the scientific basis of it, to show how it is grounded on the research, and we did the research, and how can we present different views of behavior, like the ecological views from Gibson and the dynamical views from, for example, Bernstein, and combine them together into this ecological dynamics view. So I would like to emphasize more the revolutionary action of the coaches, who are brilliant and who are very ingenious in the way they approach training, then put the emphasis on the revolution of the theory. I think practice is more revolutionary than theory, but they are linked together, of course.
Well, then the coach need to think more, no?
Then what? Sorry?
The coach now need to think more
Think
their
more.
decisions,
Yeah,
their trainings.
well, it's a good point. I'm not so sure. I know why you are saying that. For example, if they want to understand these theories, they have to read a lot and they have to think a lot about it. I agree with that. But I also think that if once they understand these theories are much more related with what they do. So it's they have to combine both things, what they do and what the new messages this series can bring to help them to do better what they already do. I don't think they have to. I don't believe that there are coaches doing only wrong things. I don't believe that at all. I think there are good things, and they should know that they can improve in even more what they are doing. So these readings help in that sense. But once they understand these ideas, I think it becomes more and more intuitive, because this is very much related with practice, with the ecology. It's not something that is separated from the practice. So that's why I think maybe it demands some thinking, but then it's more intuitive.
Well, it's a great challenge. In your opinion, the coaches of this era, they must know to study and implement the ideas of ecological dynamics?
Well, as I told you, I think they should combine their own practices with these ideas. They, the main thing is that what they want, what the coach want to achieve when they are training, it's simply to implement exercises, or they want to do some transformations to the players. If they are focused on these transformations to the players, they can see if some exercises, some interventions are better than others. So this theory is more to help them to understand what are the best approaches, how can they check if they are going into the direction they want. So it may be demanding, because it implies that you may change some of your routines, but I think it's much more according to your own goals. It's more according to what you want to achieve. So in this sense, it's a combination of what you already know with how can you use better your own knowledge.
Okay. Is one instrument more in order to create their trainings of the coach now?
I think so, but it's also a way of creating instruments. It's a way of thinking about training. It's a way of understanding how you can develop the players in the team. And that's why I think it's helpful. It gives you also tools to monitor that if you want, but also always according to your own skills, to your own skills as a coach, to your own ideas as a coach.
Now, relation with the training, will the ecological dynamics facilitate the work of the coaches?
I think so. I think it's really a way of empowering the work of the coaches. I think it's a way of showing how the daily training is moving towards the behavior in competition. It's to help the coaches to say, to answer to the question, what I'm doing here in training will help me in the competition. So this theory guides the coaches in understanding how the training is being representative of the competition. What are the aspects of the competition you are training and those that you are not. So instead of strictly monitoring heart rate or distance run, which is also helpful, you are answering questions about performance in competition. So I think it's helpful, because what the coaches want is to perform better in the next competition, in the next match.
Okay. When we talk about constraints, it's a difficult topic because when you put constraints in your task, sometimes it's difficult to measure the level of the constraints, the amount of the constraints. Um, this is a problem when you need to control the training for your athletes, the level of the constraints.
Yeah. Well, I would put it. I understand what you are asking, because we in research we show a lot of measurements about the constraints, and we show the impacts of these manipulations of constraints into behavior, and we show lots of metrics and numbers and things like that. I understand what you're saying. However, one thing is research to show that the principles are aligned with what reality needs. Another thing is what you need in training. So in training, I don't think you need to do the things as we do in research. In training, I think you need to have more friendly ways of measuring what is going on, friendly ways of assessing what is going on. And sometimes these methods can be based on observation, can be based on filming and coding some sequences, or can be more demanding where you really can track with GPS, for example, the movements of the players. But what I want to say with this is that the issue in training is not only to measure. Measure is a small part of it, but it's more to capture in a way that makes sense for the coach. For example, if I ask my colleague in my team to observe that sequence, my colleague gives me a report that makes me understand what have happened there. So there's no need to a strict measurement of all what happened, because this is very much time consuming. So the idea of measuring constraints, I think it's not fully necessary. Only some aspects should be monitored, and I strongly advise that, but not in the same way we do in research, because this takes a long time. This is one aspect. The other aspect is that, so what constraints should I manipulate? Should I manipulate all the constraints? So I don't have enough time in my life to manipulate all the constraints. And this is a very important question. What I think, what I learned from the coaches is that the best way of selecting what are the constraints that need to be manipulated and acted upon are based on the coach's diagnostic. If I'm working with the coach, the first thing I ask to the coach is, what do you think your team needs to improve? Why is that? How do you think we can do that? So based on this diagnostic of the coach, I will help him into the design of the tasks. He is the one to propose the tasks, and I will help him shaping the task, the design of the task, in order for those constraints of the task help the players or the group of players to have to find the solutions for the problem he has found that the players are not solving well. So I think coaches are very good in diagnosing, in finding what is needed in every moment. There is no scientific method to say what you need to train in the next moment. It's much more complex than that. I think it has to do with the team that you are playing in the next match, so you don't know exactly how the other team will play. It has to do with how your players have been playing the matches before and how they are in the moment that you are training. So you have aspects that you want to improve, and it's based on those aspects with the players that you have available on that time that we will try to design tasks in order for the players to find solutions, for the players to find how they can solve that problem. So this is how we train decision making, is placing the players in situations that they have to solve, not just following the decision from the coach, but putting them in situations where they have to find the solutions.
I think this is difficult because when you put constraints, the athlete is going to make mistakes in the execution. But this is the target, no? The athlete need to make mistakes in order to reorganize their system. But how the coach to know when is the time specific in order to put more constraints or quit that constraints because the athlete take a lot of mistakes. I don't know if I could explain.
I understand what you mean. Well, I think the focus is not on constraints. The focus is on achievement. It's on how the player is solving the problem or not. And if you create a task where the player is not solving the problems, the player cannot pass to his teammate is on those conditions he cannot get rid of the defender and not pass the ball to the other guy, the first person to know that make the mistake is the player. So he doesn't need the coach to tell him, you miss. Of course, he knew that the adversary has the ball. He is the first one to know that he did a mistake. He didn't succeed. So the question is not to place more constraints, is to understand what should I change in the task to help the player to find a solution to pass the ball to the other guy, if this is the exercise that we are training. So the focus is not on putting constraints, is on how can the coach with the task help the player in finding a solution for that problem. So it's not that you have to put more, you only put more constraints if the task is too easy. If the task is too easy, if he just solved that is not a problem for him, then instead of one adversary, he will have two. He will have three people marking the other guy. So you are increasing the density of the players, reducing the space, for example, and then you will see if he continues to have to be successful. This is the way you should manage the manipulation of constraints, based on the achievement of the players, based on how they are solving the problems that you are posing them.
The experience of the coach is important in order to create this environment, or a novel coach can use the ecological dynamics?
I think ecological dynamics helps coaches in all stages of development, high-level coaches as well as beginner coaches. So I think at the high-level coaches, it helps in understanding more fine-tuned constraints that help those high-level players to perform. In the beginner coach, I think no team in the world will offer the main team for a beginner coach. So beginner coaches also are starting with people who are beginning to play, to understand how to play. Young players or master players that are just having fun in playing the ball. If this is the case, he doesn't need to be so fine attuned to details of the constraints. His diagnosis about what should be trained is much more broader. It's just how can the players pass from the midfield to the area of the other team, are much more general questions. And if these questions are more general, so the constraints are also easier to manipulate, are much more bigger questions than the small details that the high-level coach has to do with. The principles are the same, but the knowledge about the constraints is more demanding at the high level than in the beginner level. But to make a beginner team to improve is also more broader, more global than to make a high-level team to improve, which is much more fine and based on small aspects than with a beginner, with a team that is just starting to learn how to play football. So because of these differences, the ecological dynamics can tell in all these cases how you can improve your skill level, even if you are a beginner or if you are a high-level coach. And so I think it's useful for all the cases, because also the needs of these coaches are different, but it's helpful anyway.
Great. In terms of self-organization, how can the sport player increase the process, and how can to improve degrees of freedom?
Well, self-organization is a technical word for something that you like to see in matches, which is creativity. Self-organization is to see how a player solves the situations. And so self-organization means that it's the local interaction that tells the player how he can solve the situation, not just doing what the coach tells him before to do. Because if he just has to act in that way, he's just implementing a decision that was programmed by the coach. Self-organization means that can work in very strict situations, but when there are variations in the match, you cannot implement the situation that was planned with one way if you don't have that way in front of you. If the things you have in front of you are not the same that you have before. So how can you solve new situations as the match always presents to us. There's always variations in the match. No, there's no two matches that are equal. So each play is unique. So if you are, how can you have solutions for a unique play that you will have tomorrow, that you don't know that you have, that today you don't know that how it will be tomorrow? So instead of programming for pre-planned solutions, ready-made solutions, we have to prepare the players to deal with solutions for the future, for being adaptable, for being creative in solving. This is the basis of self-organization. It's to help the players to perceive what is needed in the situation and act according to their own skills to solve the problem. So based on this is nothing more than training creativity since the beginning of training football, since the first day. Always the training is based on let the player do the decisions and not just tell the player what to do.
Okay. And in relation with the degrees of freedom, I think is linked with the self-organization. When you create that opportunity in order to make self-organization, the degrees of freedom are going to increase.
Yeah, well, it's more, well, degrees of freedom and degrees of constraint are together. So you are never totally free in the match. You have always players, you have more space or less space. You have your teammates that are nearby or further away. So the constraints are always there, as well as the possibilities, the degrees of freedom. So constraints and degrees of freedom go side by side. By saying this, self-organization is always based on this relationship between constraints and degrees of freedom. So the more difficult the task is when you have very tight constraints, when you don't have much space, you don't have much time, you have lots of pressure. This is more difficult than when you have lots of time and you have lots of space. So this, in training, to manage the degrees of freedom and the degrees of constraint of your players has to do with their own skills to solving the problems. If they are very skilled, you can push the constraints even more. If they are not so skilled, you should lose them a little bit more, otherwise they will not solve the task. So this has to do with the skills of the player, and constraints and degrees of freedom go side by side.
Then the skills of the player is the guide in order to put that constraints, no?
Very good, very good.
With this new perspective, should be the end of repetition practice?
Yeah, I understand what you mean. There is a great Russian scientist called Nikolai Bernstein who came with the idea of degrees of freedom. He said that there is repetition without repetition. Means that we never repeat twice the same thing. We never do the same thing twice. When we do the same thing twice, second time, we are a little bit more fatigued than the first one. We have more experience than the first one. So there's no two things that we do exactly in repetition.
Same.
Yeah. So this means that repetition do not exist. It's a mechanical concept. A machine can repeat itself, but humans do not repeat themselves. This is one thing, but your question is deeper than this. You are saying that there are coaches that just repeat the same sequence over and over and over and over and over.
Every hour.
Yeah. Well, my first idea is that probably the majority of the tasks you do with your players should not be just repeating the same sequences, because the match is so rich that if you just do that, you are missing other parts of the match. So I would not start with that, and I also alert to the fact that there are more to the match than some repetitions. But I also accept, and some very good coaches show me how useful it is, that there are some sequences, for example, set plays, that you can repeat it. And if you repeat it, you really can take advantage of the other teams. So I understand that according to what the coaches want, the stage of the team, and the adversary that against who you are going to play, that you can consider to repeat some of the plays if you want. It would not be my first choice, it would not be my emphasis, but I understand that some situations in particular can benefit from repetition. If I understand this at the more high level, the lower level it is, I think the less I would emphasize repetition. I would prefer to manage the dynamics of the game than just to emphasize repeating one sequence. But this is just my view of it. I really had coaches who show me that there are some repetitions, some set plays that if they repeat it well enough, they can score with those set plays, and that makes a huge difference for them. I understand that this may happen. It will not be, for me, my recommendation that you don't strictly focus on that. There are much other things that you should do, but I understand that you can also include those types of tasks.
Yes, I asked this question because in Mexico, in general, the coaches in the trainings, in the majority of the sports, the principal focus in order to improve their skills is only repetition in the way in order of the same task without new constraints, only the same movement. Um, and maybe is 60% or 70% of the training, and I think it's a lot of time in order to improve if you want a better skills for your players.
I fully agree with you. I think it's too much. And there is a big problem if you just repeat. And the problem is that you are not training other competencies that you may find in the match. So you are not preparing the players for the match. You are just playing for those specific situations that even may not occur in the match. Imagine that you spend the entire week training that types of corner and you never had a corner. So the entire week was not useful at all because that didn't happen in the match. So you are not preparing for the match. This is one problem. And the second problem is that once the other team learn how to cope with that repetition, you are done. You don't have capability to adapt to changes induced by the other team. So I think it's very dangerous. That's why I say in some specific circumstances, I understand that some coaches do, but I would put the emphasis in the other more adaptive way of dealing with the match. I would change completely the percentages. 20% of repetition, 80% of dynamics.
Yes, and in sports with collaboration and opposition, like a basketball, football, or in those kinds of sports, the focus is the adaptability, no?
Yeah, completely. That's because of that I think you gain much more for the matches if you train that adaptability, that intelligent adaptability, not simply to react to the other team, but to also to create problems to the other team, to your players to be very much in synchronization, in attunement with each other. So this means that you are not just repeating a sequence, you should be training how to link with the other players. And this is unique in every situation.
Great. Nicholas Bernstein was one of the first that talked of degrees of freedom in relation with motor control. But you say in a paper that other important role is the degrees of freedom is the perception, and this element is crucial in making decision. Could you explain us more about this?
Yeah, very good. You're completely right. Bernstein talked about biomechanical degrees of freedom, only that. But when we are playing, we don't. In football, the main concern of the player is not how to coordinate the limbs with the legs. That is very easy. That is done since the first day. What you have to do is to coordinate with your teammates to get away from your adversary. So your link with the environment is much more based on perception than with the biomechanics of your body. That is just a detail which is also important, but it's not what makes the difference in football. What makes the difference is the links, the perceptual links based on information, not in mechanics, that you do with your teammates and with your adversaries. So it means that this cycle of perception and action should not be strictly focus on action. And from my point of view, Bernstein focused much more strictly on action, how your body coordinates, your limbs coordinate with each other, than how do you coordinate with the environment. So based on this idea that you have to coordinate with the environment, you should also understand how you can move according to the circumstances where you are. So this means that perception and the biomechanical coordination of degrees of freedom, perception and action should be linked together, not seen as separate. So this is what I mean to say that in addition to the biomechanical degrees of freedom, you have also to coordinate the perceptual degrees of freedom, the degrees of freedom you have according to your own circumstances.
Then is one element more in order to make decisions, and in the degrees of freedom, that perception in order to work all the body.
Yeah, I would put it even more according to your interests in football. I think that decision making is much more, it's not simply how to control your body. Decision making is more how to pass, when do I have a space to dribble, when can I kick. So this has not to do with your memories, this has not to do strictly how you coordinate, this has to do with the opportunities offered by the environment, with the affordances. You have an opportunity to kick, you have an opportunity to pass. So this means that you can only detect those opportunities based on your perception. So it's not your mind telling your body what to do, it's the environment showing you the opportunity and then you act upon that opportunity. You see, that's why affordances are so important for decision making. Decision making is not a process that happens only inside of the mind. Decision making is a process according to what is needed in every situation. So it has to do with perception.
Okay. Well, we are going to finish the interview, but I have one question more.
Sure.
In order to start the world of ecological dynamics for a coach, step by step, which are your recommendations in order to start this adventure? Advice, papers, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we recently published a book that tells a lot about that. It's called The Dynamics of Skill Acquisition. Dynamics of Skill Acquisition. I can show you. Let me see. This is the book. So we just published it. It's in an American publisher called Human Kinetics, and we just do it. It has a lot to do with it. So if someone wants to learn about it, this is a good starting point. But let me give you more practical advices. If a coach who is hearing us and tomorrow he has a training session and he wants to be more ecological, what can he do? Well, the first thing is that what he wants to do he asks himself, what do I want to do with the players? So I'm going tomorrow for the training. What do I want to do with them? And you may answer, I want to do weightlifting. I'm a football coach, but I want to do weightlifting. So you have to question then, why do you think doing weightlifting is good for your players? What do you want to achieve? So if you ask these kinds of questions, you will find that what you want to do is to play better in the match. So if this is your goal, you can ask other questions like, what can I do to play better in the match? So how these training tasks I have for tomorrow are helping me to play better in the match? What can I do to these tasks to approach them to how I want my players to play in the next match? This is the kind of ecological reasoning, is to how you are creating tasks that allow you to be more attuned to the ecology of the competition. So these types of questions will help you. So how can I create a task where the players make their own decisions? It's not me who tell them what to do. How can I create a task that teaches the player what they have to do? It's not me. I don't have to say nothing. I just create the task and let it evolve. And if the task is good enough, the player will see if he's achieving the goal or not. If he will see if he's doing mistakes or not. I don't have to tell him. So this is a cleverly designed task shows if the player are doing well or not. It's the task itself who shows. This is the kind of ecological reasoning. So a coach that wants to be more ecological just have to follow this reasoning.
It's a good advice because every day I think everyone needs to say why I do that I do.
Yeah.
It's a thinking that we need to practice every day, and every coach want a player with non-linear answers, but in the practice sometimes they only stimulate linear activities. Then
Yes.
how they are going to create a non-linear player if only
Completely.
practice linear practice?
Very good. I think you put it very well. I fully agree with you. That is really something that happened. And sometimes I'm going to say a similar thing that you said with other words. Sometimes the coach wants the players to behave very creatively and at a high level, and he himself is not challenging himself to improve, he is not being creative in these tasks. So if he is not challenging himself to be better in the next training, if he's not challenging himself to be more creative in order to create better tasks for the player, how they want his players to do that? So he is contradicting himself. It's
Yes.
in the same line of what you said before.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Well, Professor, it's a pleasure to hear you, to listen your knowledge, and thank you for share that topics for Mexico and for all Latin America in general.
My pleasure. You know that I have very good relationships with Latin America. Well, Brazil, it's very close to Portugal in many aspects, but I think Latin America in general has a way of living that is also similar to the one we have in Portugal and Spain. So I deeply appreciate the characteristics of Latin America, in Mexico in particular. I like the football practice in Latin America in general. And so for me, it's a pleasure to collaborate with you, and just tell me the next time you want to collaborate, and I will be very pleased.
Thank you, Professor. And thank you, everyone, for watching us. And see you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.